Good afternoon. For my colleague-to-colleague video, wanted to start off with a little bit of background for myself. I am a high school social studies teacher, so when I think about modeling and promoting information literacy, my first thought goes to primary and secondary sources. That is a big part of my job as a social studies teacher, is teaching students the difference between primary and secondary sources, as well as teaching students not only how to find those resources, but making sure that they are credible. We do a lot of work, showing students, showing students different resources, giving them tools for how to evaluate those, and showing students bias as well, teaching them to kind of work on looking for bias. And then, once they know how to evaluate sources, they can then find them, evaluate, organize that information, and then communicate that in positive ways to show learning. And that's one of the biggest focuses of mine, especially in the era of fake news and extremely biased news sources. If I can teach students that, I think that's more positive than them knowing about a war from 200 years ago, for instance. So that's a big part of my job, I believe. These sources were really helpful in terms of looking at information literacy and looking at how technology plays a role. I thought it was interesting, Larry Cuban's statements. They were a little bit on the pessimistic side. However, I did find myself agreeing with his takes for two reasons. First was in the time period that he was speaking, like 1990s and into 2000, I thought, technology was still probably not being used to a great extent in the classroom at that point, and it was evolving so rapidly that it hadn't really made its way, at least in its best forms, into the classroom yet. So I think that's kind of the first reason why he had this pessimistic view of technology in the classroom. And second, I look, to the current time period, and I think we still have a long way to go before we're using technology in a consistent manner to actually prepare students for the workforce. And I think about my own district having iPads, and while iPads are great for creativity and things like that, I don't know if you would go into any office or, any workplace today and find people using iPads. They would probably be using laptops or desktop computers. And so sometimes I struggle with, how to utilize iPads and whether that's the best thing for our students. Because I think at its core, we should be preparing students to be the best that they can be when they enter the workforce, or the best they can be going into college, because that's, I think, what our goal is, especially when we think into the future and we think about students getting jobs in 2025, 2030, and even beyond that. I think it's good and important for the schools to look forward to what's going to be needed in the workplace. In the Pew Foundation report, looking at the implications for education and the future of students, one thing that I related to with that was that students are not as knowledgeable with technology as we often anticipate. So they are supposedly growing up in this, technologically advanced age, but many of them are smartphone dependent, as referenced in the Pew report, and most students, are in the younger generation, and we also have, plenty of students that are in lower income, and those two groups are often more smartphone dependent. And so looking at how that translates, again, in the workplace, yes, you're going to use a smartphone, but you also need the skills like typing and knowing how to use a laptop or desktop computer. And I think those skills, operating a spreadsheet, things like that, are sometimes lacking. Sometimes we don't necessarily teach that enough in our schools. So how do we make students better prepared? I think we need to figure out is what technology and tools are going to be used in the future. And so information literacy obviously very important, not only for creating positive digital citizens, but also people who can find information and organize and communicate that information as part of their job. But I think there's other skills that we need to be teaching as well. For instance, coding, I think, is one skill that will be an integral part of future jobs that will be created. And I think it's important to expose students to those kinds of skills at an early age and build on those throughout their school experience. So, love to hear your guys' feedback on this, and I look forward to reading or listening to some other videos. Thanks.